There's a silent force at work within you. It doesn't scream, it doesn't show up with horns, it doesn't smell of sulfur. It disguises itself as routine, laziness, doubt, fear. It's the invisible enemy Napoleon Hill described as the greatest thief of dreams. The habit of letting oneself go, of floating aimlessly, of living at the mercy of circumstances. He called it drifting, the mental state of those who have handed over the helm of their lives to the devil of indecision. Perhaps you're in this state right now and haven't realized it yet. You wake up tired, but not from sleep, tired of existence itself. You believe you're doing what you need to do, but deep down, you feel something is holding you back. The fear of failure keeps you back. The fear of rejection prevents you from acting. The fear of being judged forces you to keep quiet. And little by little the devil whispers, "Tomorrow will be different," and you believe it. But tomorrow never comes. Napoleon Hill interviewed hundreds of successful people. All of them, without exception, overcame a common enemy. They broke with fear. He observed that 98% of people live as prisoners of invisible forces, worried about what others think, paralyzed by doubt, numbed by comfort. Only 2% take control of their minds and decide to control their own destiny. These few people understood that hell is not elsewhere, but within every mind dominated by fear. Consider the contrast. The man who lives in drifting is like a boat adrift in a rough sea. The wind changes, he changes. The tide pushes, he goes. He doesn't know where he's going, and that's why the devil rules him. The man with purpose, on the other hand, has an inner compass. He acts even when afraid. He doesn't wait for courage to appear. He builds it in the act of facing it. Think about how many opportunities you've let slip away for fear of failure. How many times you've silenced your voice for fear of criticism. How many ideas have died within you because the fear of poverty spoke louder than the desire for freedom. This is the devil working, not with fire, but with doubts. He convinces you that it's safe not to try, that it's better to wait, that now is not the right time. And so he keeps you prisoner, without visible chains, but with mental shackles. There are stories of people who broke these chains. A man who spent 20 years believing he was incapable of change, until he realized his fear was an illusion created by his own mind. A woman who faced failure, rejection, and poverty, and discovered that by acting despite fear, fear loses its power. True exorcism doesn't happen with rituals, but with firm decisions. When you say enough, the devil retreats. Napoleon Hill said, "Fear is the devil's favorite tool," and he was right. He uses it to postpone your dreams, sabotage your faith, and keep your mind occupied with petty worries. Fear makes you believe you're small, that the world is unfair, that success is for the few. But this is the lie that keeps billions of people trapped. Few have the courage to look within and confront this invisible enemy. Few have the strength to resist the comfort that slowly destroys the soul. Few have the courage to say, "I will not be controlled." And that is why most live in silence, complaining about life while the devil smiles. Now the question is, will you continue to let him dominate your thoughts? Or will you take control of your mind and free yourself from this invisible hold? Remember, the only power the devil has over you is the power you give him. Sign up now to continue this journey of self-mastery and awaken your mind from the slumber of mediocrity. Because in the next video, you'll find out the silent pact fear makes with your soul and how it decides the fate of those who dare ignore it. Fear is humanity's oldest pact. It wasn't signed with ink, but with thought. It's the mind's agreement with its own weakness. Every time you give up, it grows stronger. Every time you silence the urge to act, it grows. Fear doesn't need to impose itself violently. You only need to hear it once for it to begin guiding you. Napoleon Hill said that the devil conquers not by force, but by suggestion. He whispers and waits, and most obey. Fear starts small. It's just a quiet voice telling you to be careful. But over time, that voice becomes a prison. It shapes your choices, limits your dreams, decides who you associate with, how much you dare to try, what you believe you deserve. You think you're deciding, but you're not. It's fear that chooses for you. It's fear that determines the size of your life. How many people do you know who are trapped in a job they hate simply because they're afraid of losing their security? How many stay in broken relationships for fear of loneliness? How many stop striving for something greater because they believe they're not good enough? These are the silent pacts. They don't require signatures, just obedience. Fear feeds on justifications. I don't have time. Now's not the time. Maybe next year. These are phrases that sound rational but hide cowardice. Hill warned, the devil disguises himself as prudence. He makes you mistake fear for wisdom, procrastination for patience, weakness for humility. And so you convince yourself you're being wise, when in fact you're being controlled. Studies show that the human brain reacts to fear as if it were a real threat of death. Therefore, the mere thought of failure activates the same mechanism that would make someone flee from a predator. That's why fear seems so compelling. It speaks the language of survival, but there's a difference between surviving and living. Fear keeps you alive. Purpose keeps you alive. Imagine a man standing before an abyss. Fear paralyzes him. He thinks about falling, about making a mistake, about losing. But another man standing before the same abyss looks ahead and jumps. The difference between them is not the absence of fear, but their mastery over it. The second man understood the secret revealed by Napoleon Hill. Whoever controls their own mind controls their own destiny. This invisible pact renews itself every day. Every time you wake up and decide not to act, it grows stronger. Every time you doubt yourself, it smiles. And the more power you give it, the more it becomes a part of you. Hill said the devil is a master at creating habits. He turns fear into routine, doubt into comfort, and indecision into normalcy. Before you know it, you no longer know who's in charge, but a break is possible. It begins with a simple thought: I don't accept living like this anymore. It's at that moment that the pact begins to unravel. Fear loses its shape when confronted. It only has power over those who run away. When you face it, it shrinks. When you act, it dissolves. The mind awakens to a new reality, that the devil never had power, only permission. There are those who broke this pact, ordinary people who decided to stop blaming fate and began to create their own. A man who grew up in poverty and vowed never again to be a slave to it. A rejected woman who transformed her pain into strength. They didn't wait for fear to go away. They acted with it in mind. And that's how fear lost its grip. Napoleon Hill stated that the human mind is like a fertile field. Either you plant purpose or the devil plants fear. There is no neutral ground. Every thought feeds one of the two, and the harvest will come whether you like it or not. Therefore, the biggest mistake is not feeling fear. It's letting it become the gardener of your life. Are you willing to break this pact? Are you ready to face the gaze of fear and say, I know who's boss? Few reach this point. Few can bear the weight of looking within and seeing how much they've been dominated. But those who do are reborn. Fear rarely speaks with its own voice. It is subtle, clever, camouflaged. It dresses up as the faces of the people you love, uses the tone of someone who cares, and speaks as if it wants your well-being. It's the mother who says, son, don't take risks. Life is dangerous. It's the friend who laughs at your dream and says, if it were easy, everyone would do it. It's the colleague who advises, better not try, you might be disappointed. These voices seem to protect, but what they really do is imprison. They are echoes of collective fear, repeated by innocent mouths. Napoleon Hill said that the devil doesn't act alone. He recruits helpers, and many don't even know they're in his service. From an early age, we are taught to obey fear. As a child, you learned that making mistakes is shameful, that losing is a sign of weakness, that dreaming big is arrogance. Little by little, your mind is molded to mediocrity. You convince yourself that security is more important than freedom, that stability is worth more than courage. Fear doesn't destroy all at once. It educates slowly until you become your own jailer. How many talents have been buried by well-intentioned words? How many ideas died before they were born because someone laughed at them? Fear creeps in like this, disguised as advice. It convinces you to live small, to stay out of trouble, to keep a low profile. And when you obey, it wins. Hill called this mass hypnosis, the state in which millions live, believing they are safe, while the devil keeps them asleep. But there's a detail few realize. Fear uses the voices of others only because you've allowed your own voice to be silenced. When you're not sure who you are, any opinion shakes you. When you don't know your purpose, any doubt paralyzes you. This is how the enemy works. Not from the outside in, but from the inside out. He merely echoes what already exists within you. Modern science confirms what Hill said almost a century ago. The human mind is programmable. What you hear repeatedly, you believe. What you believe, you feel. What you feel, you execute. And what you execute, you repeat until it becomes destiny. Fear becomes the invisible software that governs your actions, your decisions, and even your tone of voice. It makes you believe you're cautious when, in fact, you're a prisoner. See how it works. The talented young man gives up because someone doubted him. The creative man keeps quiet because he fears ridicule. The dreamy woman shrinks because she's told it's not her place. In each of them, fear prevailed, using a voice disguised as affection. It's the cruelest blow. The devil doesn't need to shout when he can speak through those you trust. But there comes a moment when the disguise breaks. It's when you realize life is passing you by, and regret begins to scream louder than fear. At that moment, a dormant force emerges within you, the voice of the soul, the same one Hill called infinite intelligence. It speaks little, but when it does, everything falls silent. It says, "You were born for more." And if you have the courage to listen, the spell is broken. From then on, something changes. The external voices still try to hold you back, but now you recognize them. Fear loses its grip. You begin to see that the advice that limited you wasn't protection, it was projection. People were talking about their own fears, not yours. They were simply handing over the weight they couldn't carry, and you, without realizing it, accepted it. Napoleon Hill insisted that every mind has the power to choose what to accept. You no longer need to absorb the fears of others. You can decide to think for yourself, to act even when trembling, to speak even when stuttering, to dream even when ridiculed. This is true rebellion, not against the world, but against the inner voice that imprisons you. Few will do this. Few will dare to face the multitude of advice that surrounds them. Few will have the courage to be misunderstood, but those who do will awaken to a freedom that cowards will never understand. The devil doesn't need to appear with flames or claws to win. His most lethal weapon is silent, invisible, and subtle. He exploits the exact moment you're about to act. He watches for an opportunity and silently plants doubt. He whispers, "You're not good enough. Don't try, it will be humiliating. Wait a little longer." These words don't come from strangers, but often from within, echoing years of internalized fear. Napoleon Hill called this mental sabotage, when the mind itself becomes the enemy of success. The trick is so perfect that many don't even notice. You plan, dream, strategize, and just when you're ready to take the first step, fear creeps in, disguised as prudence. It turns courage into hesitation, action into procrastination, determination into doubt. And so you remain motionless, believing you're being rational while the devil smiles, knowing he's won once again without having to fight. This is the invisible cycle of mediocrity. Fear comes before progress, doubt comes before achievement, and hesitation comes before victory. Thousands of people live this way every day. Talented, intelligent, creative people, but paralyzed. They have all the resources to succeed, but they miss the final step. The devil never needed to stop them from starting. He simply had to convince them not to move forward. And the power of the silent blow increases when you're surrounded by those who believe they do good. Friends, family, mentors, all can unintentionally reinforce fear. Every comment, every criticism, every piece of sage advice serves as fuel. Hill observed that the human mind is highly influenceable. What you hear repeatedly, you believe. What you believe, you act. And what you act determines your destiny. The devil is a master at turning small doubts into permanent habits. He doesn't need to make you give up once. He just needs to convince you that giving up is safe, that waiting is prudent. And so, day after day, he turns dreams into regrets. He turns courage into comfort, action into routine, life into mere survival. But there's a crucial difference between those who fall and those who overcome: awareness. The person who recognizes the silent blow sees the pattern. They notice when fear arrives as a disguised visitor and understand that it only has power because it's been allowed. It's at that moment that dominance shifts. Fear ceases to be an invisible dictator and becomes a challenge to be faced. Imagine a man planning to launch his own business. He has the ideas, the plan, the passion, but before he can begin, the inner voice arises. What if it fails? This voice is the devil using doubt as a weapon. If he gives in, the opportunity is lost. If he resists, he discovers something extraordinary. Action, even when afraid, reduces the power of fear. Each step taken is a silent victory against the influence that tried to control him. Hill taught us that winners are precisely those who act despite fear. They don't wait for absolute courage. They build courage in the act of acting. Every small step defies the devil. Every decisive decision is a liberating blow. And slowly, the mind once trapped by fear transforms into a mind of purpose. The silent coup has worked for centuries because few realize what's happening. It doesn't choose victims based on talent or intelligence. It chooses based on the habit of giving in, of not acting, of believing that security is more important than freedom. Those who recognize the pattern break the cycle. Those who act, even insecurely, shape their own destiny. Consider the examples from history. Ordinary people who became extraordinary simply because they refused to give in to doubt. They felt fear, but they didn't let fear rule. They transformed anxiety into action, uncertainty into strategy, and hesitation into determination. The devil tried to stop them, but they chose action over silence. The lesson is clear. The devil's silent strike only works if you allow it. He only defeats those who give in to the inner voice of doubt, who hide behind excuses, who wait for courage to appear on its own. Freedom, fulfillment, and greatness are for those who face fear daily, who decide to act despite it, who refuse the comfort of paralysis. Fear doesn't just live in the present. It settles in the shadows of the past. It stirs up old memories, distorts recollections, and plants doubts that seem real. Every past failure becomes a warning. Don't try again. You can't do it. Every criticism you receive becomes a sentence. You can't do it. Every mistake you make becomes a law. You don't deserve to win. Napoleon Hill called this memory manipulation, the devil using what you've already experienced to dictate what you will do. It's subtle, but deadly. You look back and remember the failure, the ridicule, the rejection. It appears as lessons learned, but in reality, it's invisible shackles. It disguises itself as experience, but its purpose is to imprison. The mind begins to believe that the past determines the future. You feel like you're tied to an invisible line that limits your courage, your choices, and your dreams. And that's where most people fall. People look back and say, "I can't try again. I've failed before." Fear uses these memories as a weapon of repetition. It convinces you that everything that happened will happen again if you dare to act. Hill argued, the human mind can be held hostage by itself when it accepts these lies without question. The big difference between winners and losers is how they interpret the past. The winner looks back, but not with fear. They look back with learning. They understand that each mistake is an instruction, not a sentence. Each criticism is a chance to improve, not to remain silent. Each defeat is fuel for the next step, not an insurmountable barrier. Hill reminds us, the mind that masters fear turns the past into a lever, not a prison. The devil, of course, doesn't give up. He still whispers, "Remember what happened. You can't do it. No one will believe you. Why even try?" These voices echo so loudly that you almost believe them. But it's precisely at this moment that inner strength emerges. It's when you realize that fear is using your own memories against you. It's when you understand that the past only has power if you allow it. Imagine a man who has failed in an important project. The memory of failure haunts him, but he decides to start again, more prepared, more aware. Each step he takes is a rupture of the silent pact that fear tried to renew. Each small victory is a partial destruction of the power the devil sought to exert through memories. He learns that action overcomes memory, that movement corrects stagnation, that courage builds the future, even with ghosts of the past at his side. The devil is persistent, but not invincible. He depends on your acceptance. He needs you to believe that the past defines you, that your previous failure is your final sentence. But you can choose differently. Hill stated, "The man who learns to master his thoughts controls the fate that others consider inescapable." It's a radical decision to look back, acknowledge mistakes, absorb the lessons learned, and still act. The success stories Hill studied share a pattern. They all faced painful memories. They all felt fear again, and yet they forged ahead. A young man rejected countless times, who now leads great teams. A woman who lost everything and rebuilt her life, transforming pain into fulfillment. Each of them broke the tyranny of internal fear, even with painful memories trying to convince them otherwise. The enemy that operates within memories is treacherous but vulnerable. It cannot resist active awareness, deliberate action, and persistence. Every step you take, every decision that defies hesitation, every calculated risk diminishes its power. It weakens in the face of consistent courage, even if that courage trembles before the memory of the past. Few dare to face this enemy. Most surrender to the repetition of mistakes, to scars, and to criticism. But those who rise up discover that the fear of the past is nothing more than a shadow. It moves, but it doesn't bite. It exists, but it doesn't rule. And the next step is transformation, from a mind conditioned by fear to a mind driven by purpose. Fear isn't limited to the past or memories. It invades the present, manipulating your emotions and transforming natural feelings into invisible prisons. It disguises itself as anxiety, sadness, and excessive worry. Hill observed that the human mind is extremely susceptible. When you allow a negative feeling to take control, it begins to shape your actions, your decisions, and eventually, your entire life. The devil doesn't need to attack directly. He uses your own emotions as a weapon. How many times have you held back because you feared rejection? How many opportunities slipped away because anxiety overcame courage? How many brilliant ideas were stifled because doubt created a storm within you? Fear turns every emotion into a break, every sensation into a barrier. It doesn't need physical chains. It creates invisible handcuffs in the mind, convincing you that you can't move forward. And the worst part is that these emotions seem legitimate. You feel them, believe them, and react. But in reality, they've been manipulated. Hill said that the human mind is like a fertile field. What you cultivate grows. If you allow fear to control your emotions, it grows stronger. Every time you react to it, it gains power. Every time you give in to anxiety, insecurity, and doubt, it takes hold more deeply. The devil is a master at using what you call instinct or natural feeling against you. He makes you appear prudent, But in reality, you are a slave. He distorts joy into distraction, love without fear of loss, ambition into anxiety. He creates an emotional labyrinth and waits for you to get lost within it. But freedom exists, and it begins when you realize you can observe your emotions without being controlled by them. When you understand that feeling fear isn't a problem, the problem is obeying it. Hill taught that mental discipline is key. When you decide to act despite fear, when you transform emotion into motivation, you break the cycle that imprisons thousands of people. Consider a simple example. You're afraid to expose yourself, to try something new, to speak your mind. Fear arises and says, "It's dangerous. You might fail." If you give in, you remain immobile, and the emotion gains strength. But if you decide to speak, create, and act, even trembling, the emotion loses its power. Fear becomes merely a warning, not a sentence. Every deliberate action against it strengthens your mind while weakening your inner adversary. Hill studied countless cases, people who transformed fear into achievement. An artist who trembled before every performance but took the stage thousands of times until he conquered his nerves. An entrepreneur who felt terrified before investing everything in his idea but persisted and achieved unimaginable success. Each of them realized something essential. Fear is inevitable, but not invincible. And the devil, of course, doesn't stop. He reinvents himself with every step you take. When the fear of the past subsides, he attacks through future worries. He creates catastrophic scenarios, exaggerates risks, makes you imagine rejections that haven't yet happened. He feeds on what-ifs and builds prisons that don't exist except in your mind. The secret to overcoming it is simple yet radical. Consistent action, mindfulness, and deliberate control of your emotions. Every time you decide to act despite your fear, you reduce its power over you. Every time you observe your emotions without reacting automatically, you destroy the invisible manipulation that sustains the cycle of fear. Few do this. Most react, submit, accept emotional imprisonment, and continue living a life of mediocrity, unaware that freedom was just a courageous step away. But those who confront it, who defy the inner storm, discover something extraordinary. Fear is not a monster. It is a messenger, an indicator of where the devil's power lurks. Facing it transforms you from enemy to guide, and the emotional realm becomes fertile ground for purpose and action. Fear doesn't act alone. It finds invisible allies in everyone around you. Friends, family, co-workers, acquaintances, all can, without realizing it, strengthen your inner enemy. Every critical comment, every disguised laugh, every prudent piece of advice is used by the devil as a tool of manipulation. He'll emphasize that the human mind is highly influenceable. What you accept as external truth becomes an internal belief, and this belief dictates your actions. Consider everyday examples. A friend questions your plan. Do you really think it'll work? A family member warns, better not risk it. Have you thought about what if it fails? A colleague suggests, maybe it's better to wait. These aren't just pieces of advice. They're invisible chains that fear uses to reinforce its mental prison. And often, you don't even realize you're being controlled. You accept them as guidance, but in reality, you're giving in to the power of collective fear. The devil is a master at turning other people's opinions into mental shackles. He knows that when you depend on external approval, your decisions will never be free. Every choice will be conditioned by what others think. Every action will be measured by the fear of criticism. Hill studied thousands of people and noticed a pattern. Those who achieved success mastered the art of separating other people's opinions from their own decisions. They learned that the only judgment that matters is their own. Imagine a person who wants to launch their project. They feel fear, but they're determined. Someone close to them comes along and questions their capabilities. Their internal fear grows, fueled by external opinions. If they give in, the opportunity disappears. If they ignore it and act, even feeling the weight of judgment, the fear diminishes. Every purposeful action reduces the power that others, even unintentionally, have over their mind. The problem is that most allow themselves to be dominated. Approval becomes more important than action. Fear grows stronger, fueled by every comment, every criticism, every external doubt accepted as law. Hill called this dependence on the opinions of others, a silent mechanism that keeps millions trapped in lives smaller than they could possibly achieve. But there is a path to freedom. It begins with awareness, realizing that every external opinion is just that, an opinion, recognizing that you have the power to decide independently. The second step is deliberate action, acting despite criticism, moving forward despite prudent advice and external doubts. Each such step is a direct blow to the silent pact of fear. Consider historical examples. Great inventors, leaders, and visionaries often faced ridicule, criticism, and rejection before achieving success. Thomas Edison was ridiculed before creating the light bulb. Oprah Winfrey faced dismissals and humiliation before becoming a global figure. Each of them understood that fear, fueled by other people's opinions, is only powerful if you allow it. The secret is simple, but it requires mental discipline. Every external comment only has an effect if you internalize it. A mind that masters fear chooses which voices to listen to and which to ignore. Fear becomes a warning signal, not a sentence. Hill emphasized that controlling one's own mind is the only form of true freedom. When you decide to act independently of external voices, you create an invisible field of personal power. The devil doesn't give up. He tries to use everyone around you to keep you trapped. But every act of courage, every purposeful decision, every action that ignores collective fear strengthens the mind and weakens the enemy. The result is progressive. From a prisoner of opinions, you become sovereign over yourself. Few dare to tread this path. Most prefer the approval of others to inner freedom. But those who resist, who face the fear amplified by external voices, discover that life has a power that cowards will never know. Freedom, purpose, action. Fear only dominates those who respect it too much. The devil doesn't need big blows. He infiltrates the small, everyday habits. He knows that repetition is the key to domination. Every seemingly harmless routine can become an invisible chain that keeps you trapped in fear, doubt, and mediocrity. Napoleon Hill taught that negative habits are like seeds of fear planted in the mind, slowly growing until they transform the individual into a silent slave to their own choices. Think about the habits you repeat daily. Procrastination, for example. Putting off small tasks today creates a feeling of immediate relief, but increases the fear of failure in the long run. Self-pity, dwelling on past mistakes, fuels doubt and impedes action. The pursuit of constant approval. Every time you seek validation from others for your choices, you strengthen the power of fear. Small actions accumulate, creating an invisible prison that seems comfortable but is lethal to success. The devil works subtly. He doesn't shout, he doesn't threaten. He creates routines, habits, and patterns that become almost imperceptible and then turns them into shackles. Every morning you wake up and do only the bare minimum. Every night you allow yourself to be consumed by distractions. Every decision you make in which you choose comfort over deliberate action are steps that strengthen the hold of fear on your mind. Most people don't realize they're being controlled. They believe that routine is security, that habits are neutral, that repeating behaviors is natural. But Hill taught that every habit shapes the mind, and the mind shapes the life. When you allow fear-driven habits to take hold, you surrender control without realizing it. The devil doesn't need to fight. He just waits for you to follow the pattern. But there is a path to liberation. It begins with awareness, observing every habit, every routine, every small behavior, and asking, does this empower me or imprison me? The second step is deliberate action, replacing habits that fuel fear with habits that fuel purpose. Waking up earlier to take action, writing down ideas even when insecure, speaking up even when faced with criticism, seeking challenges instead of comfort. Each change strengthens your mind and weakens the enemy. The power of acting against a negative habit is multiplier. One purposeful decision breaks the cycle. 2 decisions create momentum. 3 establish a pattern. Hill showed that conscious repetition turns courage into routine, and positive habits become weapons against fear. The devil loses ground with each small conscious victory. Examples abound. People who became leaders began with small acts of discipline, waking up early, planning their day, avoiding distractions, facing daily fears. Repeating these acts builds mental resilience. Each positive habit is a brick in the wall of freedom. Each negative habit is a wall of the invisible prison. The secret lies in choosing which walls you build. And most importantly, habits aren't built with willpower alone, but with awareness. Hill said the mind needs to be active, focused, and aware to break established patterns. Simply recognizing a negative habit isn't enough. It needs to be replaced with deliberate action that strengthens purpose, courage, and self-mastery. Few realize the magnitude of the daily impact of routine. Most live on autopilot, repeating habits that cement fear and mediocrity. But those who awaken to this truth, who challenge every limiting habit, discover that freedom is not just an abstract concept. It is the direct consequence of mental discipline applied daily. Fear doesn't need major events to dominate you. It seeps into everyday details, into seemingly insignificant choices. Hill said that life is made up of small, accumulated decisions, and that most people lose control precisely at this point. Every decision you postpone, every choice you avoid, every action you fail to take strengthens fear's power over your mind. Consider the small daily decisions, whether to get out of bed or stay in your comfort zone, whether to speak your mind or keep quiet, whether to study more or put it off, whether to risk something new or cling to the familiar. Every action shapes the mind. Every omission limits it. The devil doesn't need big blows. He knows that small acts of inaction repeated every day create an invisible prison that's nearly impossible to break. Have you ever noticed how harmless procrastination habits seem? Today, you put off one task, tomorrow another, and then another. Suddenly, the fear is so ingrained that even the thought of acting triggers anxiety. Hill called this hesitation accumulation. Each small decision ignored reinforces fear and diminishes confidence. The pattern becomes automatic, and the individual convinces themselves they can't change, when in fact they are being conditioned by the repetition of small acts of giving up. The problem is that most people accept this invisible prison as normal. They become accustomed to fear, doubt, and insecurity. They wake up every day and repeat patterns that limit their lives, believing this to be prudence, when in reality they are handing over their fate to a silent force. He'll emphasize that freedom and greatness arise not from luck, but from the conscious application of every small decision. Imagine someone who wants to start a personal project but puts it off every day. Each delay seems small, but added together, the days become years and the fear grows stronger. Each choice of comfort over action is another brick in the mental prison. Hill said that the human mind responds to repetition. What is repeated becomes internalized, and internalized fear dictates future actions, invisibly but powerfully. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail lies in conscious decision-making. The victor understands that every choice matters, that every small act of courage weakens fear, that every deliberate action builds strength, while every omission builds imprisonment. Hill studied countless examples. Ordinary people who changed their lives not because they were lucky, but because each day, each decision, each action was taken with awareness and purpose. The devil knows this and tries to make every decision confusing, difficult, or unpleasant. He transforms the simple into complex, the possible into risky, action into doubt. He creates what-if scenarios that paralyze even the most prepared. But the conscious mind learns to differentiate real danger from imagined fear. Hill asserted that the secret lies in taking action, even when doubt reigns supreme. Each step taken strengthens the mind and diminishes the power of fear until it becomes irrelevant. Small decisions shape your life more than major events. Every morning, you choose to act, study, create, fight. Even trembling is a blow against the invisible grip of fear. Every night you review the day, acknowledge what you've done, and prepare for tomorrow. You build freedom. Hill reminds us, consistency turns courage into habit, habit into discipline, discipline into destiny. Few realize the magnitude of small choices. Most remain passive, surrendering their fate to fear and indecision. But those who awaken, who take responsibility for each act, discover that freedom, confidence, and success lie in the details, in the sum of each small decision made with purpose and courage. You've come this far, but there's still something you need to understand. Fear doesn't wait. It acts silently. It doesn't need to invade your life violently. It infiltrates thoughts, emotions, habits, and small decisions. It is patient, cunning, and persistent. As you read these words, it watches, analyzing every weakness, every doubt, every hesitation. The devil knows it only takes a moment to completely dominate. He knows that every second of indecision strengthens his power. And now you face the ultimate choice. Continue obeying the small voices of doubt or break the cycle. Most choose safety, their comfort zone, their excuses. They allow fear to continue dictating their actions, letting life pass by without any major achievements. But you are not the majority, or at least you don't need to be yet. There is an opportunity, one last chance to take control, to act before the devil transforms the last of your strength into silent regret. Napoleon Hill said, "The devil is a master at creating illusions of security and deceiving the mind with the comfort of inaction. He transforms fear into advice, doubt into prudence, hesitation into norm. He knows he doesn't need to make you fail. He just needs to convince you that not trying is safer. And so he keeps you trapped, invisibly, while the world moves on. And every day you allow this, he grows stronger, infiltrating your mind deeper and creating a nearly indestructible prison. You can look at your life and realize how many opportunities you've let slip away, how many dreams you've abandoned, how many projects you haven't started, how many words you haven't said, how many acts of courage you haven't made. Each of these moments is another brick in the invisible prison built by fear." Hill emphasized, "It's not the great failure that destroys the mind. It's the sum of small daily surrenders. Every hesitation, every postponement, every concession to fear is like giving it permission to continue. But there is still a way out. The first step is to recognize the enemy. Look him in the eye and understand how he infiltrates every aspect of your life, your memories, your emotions, the opinions of others, your habits, your daily decisions. Recognize his cunning, but also recognize his weakness. Fear only has power because you allow it." Hill taught that active awareness and deliberate action are weapons capable of defeating him. The second step is to act. Even if your heart is racing, even if doubt screams within you, take action. Every act of courage, no matter how small, weakens the silent pact of fear. Every purposeful decision, every positive habit reinforced, every confident thought planted is a direct blow to the invisible tyranny that has taken hold. Transformation isn't instantaneous, but it is inevitable for those who decide to confront it. The third step is persistence. The devil will not give up easily. He will change tactics, take new forms, create new obstacles, new whispers, new deceptions. But each resistance, each conscious choice of action, each challenge overcome builds strength, confidence, and freedom. Hill asserted that the mind that learns to persist in the face of fear transforms the impossible into the inevitable. And now, the most terrifying truth. Many never realize they're about to lose their lives to fear until it's too late. Every second of indecision is a lost opportunity. Every day of hesitation brings you closer to ultimate regret. It's silent, invisible, and lethal. You may wake up tomorrow and realize you didn't try, you didn't fight, you didn't win. And then the devil will have triumphed without a direct blow, only with the patience and cunning of those who know how to wait. But you still have time. You can still decide to act, face your doubts, break your negative habits, challenge external voices, and take control of your emotions. You can transform fear into alertness, hesitation into impulse, doubt into determination. The devil's silent pact only ends when you decide you will no longer obey. Sign up now to continue this journey and learn how to destroy every invisible chain that fear has built in your life, step by step, with method and discipline. Because in the next video, you'll find out how fear manipulates your own memories and experiences to create a cycle of silent defeat, and why most people only realize it when it's too late, when they've already lost to the invisible enemy. The choice is yours, the action is yours, time is running out, and the enemy waits silently, patiently, watching every hesitation.